Saber Ice Anonymous here. We've got a very, very special guest today. Somebody I've admired for quite some time, a large figure as far in the fields of both martial arts, fitness, and that kind of thing. Dr. Mark Cheng, how you doing? Welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's an honor to be part of this.
All right, so I'll go a little bit through your background here. I'll just kind of it's a big thing. You are easily the most qualified person we have ever had on the program. CEO, K3 Combat Movement Systems, senior instructor at StrongFirst, instructor lecturer with Functional Movement Systems, human performance specialist with Beachbody, chief instructor of Kettlebells Los Angeles, and then you're the director of Chung-Hua Institute for Chinese Orthopedic Medicine and Martial Arts Research, which is your main.
Yes,
thing.
That's my clinic.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that's still pretty relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you are also a student and colleague of Pavel Tsatsouline.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a colleague of his, but I'm definitely a student of Pavel Tsatsouline's. Pavel, for those of you that are listening in who have never heard of him before, is the guy that basically brought kettlebells out of the Soviet Union. So before Pavel, there were, you'd see maybe kettlebells in like random strongman gyms or like, Eastern Bloc countries, but it was because of Pavel's work that the kettlebell had an instructional program attached to it. An instructor certification program. So its ubiquity now is really thanks to him.
Oh, absolutely. And
I was really fortunate to train with him quite a bit privately and semi-privately for a number of years. So yeah, I'm just in the right place, right time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also you're a student of Dan Inosanto.
Yes, very honored to be a student of Guru Dan Inosanto.
Yeah, so, and I know a lot of people, I know we've got a couple of instructors who have trained with him in the past and who are Wing Chun people from various people in that circle. So
yes.
I know people would be interested in that. But yeah, so, I mean, this is, like I said, and like I alluded to, you represent a very large body of knowledge, which we are, of course, trying to tap into here at TPLA. So obviously we like to have people like you around, Also, if anybody's interested, you wrote one of the best kettlebell books out there with Greg Cook, Kettlebells from the Ground Up.
Yes, that was a lot of fun, that project. There are 6 main lifts that you'll see in most of the like kettlebell instructor certification programs. StrongFirst, which is the group that I teach for now, the 6 lifts are the kettlebell swing, the Turkish getup, the clean, the squat, the press, and then the snatch. So the swing is one that most people normally see demonstrated a lot, but the getup is one of those that's like totally different because it's not plyometric. It's very slow, and it's done usually from lying down all the way to holding the bell in the overhead locked out position. And then returning all the way back down. So it requires quite a lot of control through very many different vectors and angles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these exercises that if anybody has asked me for advice, I've probably given that exercise out to people. Because,
awesome.
I mean, especially for weapon work, it really is a kind of, it hits all your marks, right? You're going to get, now, of course, it's a strength training exercise, but for everything that we do in martial arts, especially with weapon work, because we're holding an apparatus, we have to keep it out in front of us, shoulder stability and alignment, all very important. So I can't recommend it enough. If you can, I'll put a link to the book on FMS if anybody wants to pick it up. I totally recommend that. And then, but you also did something called Pre-hab Rehab, which was kind of for coaches and trainers and stuff like that.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it's funny that you mentioned that because we didn't really think too carefully through who we were aiming the product at. There was just a certain body of knowledge that I wanted to put out there. I thought there were these 5 postures that I found that tended to help most of my patients. And so I wanted to be able to put that that training reference or that training, resource out there. And a lot of the people that seemed to benefit most from it were clinicians, trainers, physical therapists, and coaches. I think we need to maybe revisit that at some point and then just make like an end user, like someone that has no background as a movement professional, but like how can they benefit from these exercises as well?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, that even though like if people like look at that and they start looking at it, I think everybody can benefit from them. I mean, I don't think that those particular videos are particularly over people's heads, especially since we're talking about movement, and the
Yes.
demonstrations are very clear and stuff like that. But why I was bringing that up is because the kind of premise behind it is very interesting. It's something that's very close to my heart. We're both in the FMS system, all of that, but about movement, first of all, being very, very important, and then talking about fundamental movements and building up movement on top of proper movement and all of that. And then if something goes wrong somewhere in that chain, the whole thing is out there. And that that prehab rehab stuff was it's all the stuff that's very, very simple, and a lot of people completely neglect it because it doesn't give you the the things that the rock star stuff, as I say.
Sure.
But
Sure.
what I find great about it is the whole philosophy is that those are the things that you work on that can really unlock potential and really unlock performance, but also help you heal from injury. So both of those two dichotomies there.
For sure. And in fact, a lot of it is congruous with our experience in traditional martial arts. I mean, if you look at most of the guys in traditional martial arts, no one wants to stretch, no one wants to sit in stances, no one wants to practice footwork patterns. People don't want to do basics. They want to get to the flashy forms and spar.
Right.
Well, okay, that's cool when you're young, but as you're young and you're piling up more and more hours of doing flashy forms and sparring, without honoring those details and prerequisites in movement, you're actually accruing more and more micro injury, and in some cases, macro injury. So the stuff that you skipped over is the stuff that you're going to have to like not only heal back from that injury, but then once you've healed back from that injury, the rehab is going to be all of those things that you skipped over anyway. So like taking the time to be able to communicate that to people, to explain that to people, and not just tell them, yeah, all this stance work, it's just fluff, it's just like character training or whatever. It's not the case at all. I mean, people will describe it as that when they don't know what they're talking, or they don't have a good way of describing or understanding the value of those practices from a physical level. So it's very like seductive to go into the stuff that's like the really cool looking forms, the like flashy throws, the sparring, the jump spin kicks. But like the most boring stuff is really the armor that allows you to do that other stuff, that other more difficult stuff with greater ease and sustainability.
Oh, absolutely. In my younger days, I did a little bit of wushu, and you do all the kip ups and all of that kind of thing. And you can only do those for a limited time. I mean, I can sort of kip up now and all that kind of stuff. And my teacher Mayu is friends, of course, with Zhao Chongjun. Who that was, a wushu guy.
Mm-hmm.
He did the detang stuff. He was very famous for detang.
Okay.
He was in a bunch of movies, but he can't do that anymore. It's it's that was a young man's thing. I mean, jumping up in the air and laying flat on your back and all that kind of stuff. But and I think this goes with something we were talking about just before we started. Traditionally speaking, I wasn't allowed to fight for a full 3 years into my training, right? When I started. I know a lot of people now, that's how they start, right? They get a bunch of gear, they show up at a meet, and they start bonking each other.
Mm-hmm.
But what you alluded to there is that you have a progression, a steps up, right? Some sort of, like you said, a kind of ramp up or a indoctrination to that type of movement, into a fitness to prepare the body for what's about to happen to it.
Right. An onboarding process is really one of the easiest and safest ways of making sure that we don't lose people like that, you know, are really well intentioned. They want to come, they want to train, they've got their, they've got their gear, they're so excited. And then they get hurt 2 weeks into the training or into the process. And then it's like, then they're sidelined and all the stuff that they bought now goes and collects dust. I mean, that doesn't benefit anybody.
Right.
But what we need to do is be able to communicate to people like, look, this isn't like, this may seem like fluff, but this is the stuff that's preparing your body to be able to do everything else so that you don't get hurt. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that, it's inevitable. We'll say like, oh, no, I don't have a problem with my knee. I don't have a problem with this. I don't have a problem with that. And, we can't force people to do things unless we actually put hard limits and really establish meaningful boundaries and say like, yeah, that's cool. Like, I'm glad you haven't had a knee injury yet, but you are still going to do these exercises. And until you do them up to a particular standard, you are not going to be allowed to go on to whatever else. And there will inevitably be a loss of some folks because they feel entitled to go right fast forward to the cool, quote unquote, cool stuff. But in doing so, they're going to probably do so in a reckless fashion, injure themselves, possibly injure other people. And so like, we have to look at those folks that won't honor those guidelines and won't honor those like little speed bumps along the way as folks that, this is part of the weeding process. And it's not so much a weeding in terms of like judging people in character. It's more like limiting our liabilities.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, whatever tool you've got in your hand, you get in there, it's combat, it's a fight, right? Whether it be a sport or, or anything like that, but you run the risk of real injury.
Sure.
We were talking last night and technically speaking, you're not going to have any, the place you're probably going to be the most likely to get run through with a sword is in a play because nobody uses swords anymore. That being said, anytime you go at it not with a cooperative intention, I mean, that just shows like even a cooperative intention in a stage combat setting is dangerous. People get injured all the time in stage combat, in very much the same ways they get injured in real combat. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the most important things I think people can take away from anything that we're trying to do is that ramp it up, right? Like start simple, learn your body first, then start learning a sword and all that. What do you, cause your main weapons experience is in Kali Eskrima, correct?
Actually, my main weapons background is pretty much all through Chinese martial arts.
Okay.
So, staff, butterfly swords, jian, straight swords, 3-sectional, and like things like that. So, I came to Kali fairly late in the game. I mean, like I didn't start really seriously training with Guru and Asano he'd invited me to class, I think probably in 04 or something like that. And then I don't think I started actually showing up until like 06, 05, 06. I think it was 05, actually. It was just right before my son was born. And then like took time off when my kids were born. So, and then, back at it.
Right.
So,
right
yeah.
right.
Kali and Filipino martial arts, especially training at the Asano Academy, is my main instruction these days as far as weaponry arts go. But to me, it's more like a codex, right? Like, let me phrase it, more like a Rosetta Stone. So it's like I get to use Kali as a lens with which to view all of the Chinese martial arts forms that I've learned before and break them down. So it's now like, oh, I get to see why that move is done a certain way. I get to see why that like posturing is done a certain way. I get to see what these things like outside of the very, very obvious, like what a little bit more advanced or a little bit more, or maybe I should say less obvious application would be.
Yeah.
and have better drills with which to be able to actually pull off those moves. I mean, anyone can think of like, oh, this move is for whatever. Yeah, okay, now pull that off in sparring. So
Yeah.
the drilling really helps that. That's another thing too. Great point that I think your listeners really should pay attention to. A lot of folks will argue that free sparring is the end all be all. And it can be, but the attrition rate's going to be super high.
Right.
And there are going to be a lot of people that compensate their way into maybe a win or two, but won't be able to sustain it because once those compensations run out, they're screwed. It's like really the drilling that allows you to be able to find the openings and to be able to recognize the openings and flow into those openings well with ease, without stress, without compensating. So I can't emphasize enough that the drilling is a crucial part of training.
Oh, absolutely. You know, there was a video that just made the rounds recently, I saw, of early Mike Tyson. And they showed him training with his coach with his combinations, and then they showed him using those combinations in the fights, and they looked exactly the same, right? Like every movement that he did was exactly the same as from there, and that's what you're talking about. That you know, he's drilling those things so much. There's nothing you can do to stop it once it starts.
Yep.
So yeah, no, that's a really good point. I mean, I think the especially with things as they are today, free sparring is definitely one of those things everybody wants to get to, and everybody wants to do right away.
Yeah, I mean, like with just about every martial art, you know, people come in, they're like boxing. Oh yeah, I want to get in the ring. I don't want to hit the heavy bag. I want to do that, dude. Like, master your body mechanics, master the strategy, recognize the openings. Some pattern recognition goes a long way. Same thing with weapons. I mean, like you'll see people that want to do like, you know, stick sparring or whatever, or fencing. And it's like, you really want to contest without building up a vocabulary movement first. And same thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, people have glamorized that, let's forget the warm-ups. I just want to roll.
Right.
And that, and you know, and some instructors pander to that. Okay, great. If that's what you want, fine. But you're going to severely hamstring the shelf life of your students.
Yeah, absolutely. And so okay. So if we're going. I'm glad we're kind of on the same page with the Chinese weapons, because the Chinese arsenal, of course, is extremely varied, and there's all kinds of different, from long weapons, short weapons, all kinds of things. What do you think? Because I know this is a question that's going to come up with people. What do you think would be a good, I don't know, top 3 conditioning things that people should do outside of weapon work? If you know, that would be the best time spent for them.
It's tough because like when I recommend a particular practice, like let's say yoga or kettlebells or what have you, right? Really, the quality of the experience is contingent on the quality of the instructor.
Right.
And also how well you yourself, you know, the end user, follow the instruction. So like, it's tough for me to recommend a particular tool or a particular practice without having first knowledge of the instructor or the resource that people are following.
Yeah. Well, I meant more from a mechanical point of view, from a fitness kind of thing, like
Okay.
like push-ups or you know, something that people could use to work out, because that's a question we get a lot. You know, give us a workout for saber, give a workout for weapons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So even something as relatively simple as like a sun salutation, right? The sun salutation series in yoga, done religiously and done well, like, and especially with like attention to the details of how it's supposed to be done, can be ultra rich, for people. Same thing as you mentioned earlier with kettlebells. I mean, like something like a Turkish getup, a swing, and a squat for the average person. Those 3 are what I call the 3 kings of strength. Like, to be able to do those well, really gives the body a great inventory of strength from which to draw on. So yeah, I mean, really, if I had like just two things that I had to do or was limited to, that I would have everyone do, it would probably be those two things.
Yeah, Turkish getups definitely. Those always have to be in there. Um, I mean, what they do to the shoulder, the hip, everything, they'll help your lunge, they'll help everything. Um, but yeah, very cool.
So yeah, if you minimalist, the sun salutation I think is crucial too. One of the things that the Turkish getup does not do is inversion, right? There's no point at which the head is below the heart.
Right, right.
So the sun salutation does that quite well. Also, I think there's a lot of ranges of motion that we don't get into for obvious reasons with the bells, but to be able to master those with body weight is very, very helpful.
Yeah, we also I also you know, in my practice we have a qigong that goes through essentially these types, just the basic, you know, twist the waist, get the, you know, move the shoulders, you know, and you go through all the planes of motion. You do a forward bend and come back up, and
Like 8 pieces of brocade kind of thing.
sort of, yeah, yeah. It's six moves we call the Taoist longevity, but it's it's very much like Baduanjin.
Yep.
Just a basic, just a basic movement warm up. Just get to everything moving. And that's, I think, another good point. If you want to, we could talk about that a bit, is kind of like the effort of no effort. There's, especially with novices and for instructors out there too, getting novices, you know, to relax, to feel, to feel movement as a kind of like a free thing rather than something that's being forced through, and of course trying to control your strikes and keep, you know, keep those things. It's very easy to hit, to swing for the fences and to, you know, do all that kind of thing. But the way we generally move when we're really, really good is with very little effort.
Yes. Yes. I think instructors are the people that have the obligation, really the obligation or responsibility to not only communicate that to their students, but also to create the right environment for that to happen. Like I see a lot of instructors talking about sung, be relaxed, be fluid, be this, be that, take your time, be chill. And then they create an environment that's high stress for the students. And it's like, dude, you're talking about one thing and then totally like hamstringing it on the other, right? Like if you want to create an environment where someone has an access point to sung, to being relaxed, to being calm, to being chill, to being able to use good biomechanics, to be able to breathe, all of those things, you have to make the environment so chill that they're able to access all of those things first.
Right.
Like if you're going at them like 90 miles an hour and you're just complaining at them or just nagging them to relax, oh, drop your shoulders, relax, do this, do that, you're, as an instructor, you're ineffectual. Then that's at a minimum, that's being polite. So like for us as instructors, we need to be able to create that environment where people can focus on the priority of good biomechanics, be able to recognize and develop the awareness of when they're not using those good mechanics, as well as like when we're contributing to stress. Like, is the environment such that like you're just being inundated with like attack after attack after attack when you're like you don't have any way of dealing with it, you know? So like we have to be able to feed stimuli in a manner such that people understand like, okay, this is what I do, and to be able to learn how to handle that in a way that's like intelligent, efficient, effective, calm, like safe, all of those things.
Yeah, I think too, and I know I've had a problem with this in the past, I know a lot of instructors have in the past, is that a lot of times we don't give the student enough room to just take it in and try it and do it, you know, where, you know, sometimes you don't do anything as a teacher and you just have to let the student kind of work with it and, you know, like that. Because if you're constantly giving instruction to them, it starts coming off as criticism, and then you get that environment of stress again.
Yeah, sometimes just being able to absorb stuff, right? Like with my kids, there are times when like I'll explain stuff to them, and then like that's it. Like as few words as possible, because if I have to keep saying something to them over and over again, like that glossed over look in their eyes, then that means that I've lost them already,
Yeah.
right? So at that point, saying more doesn't help; it just hurts more. So like with our students, with people that we're training, to be able to give them what my mentor Gray Cook talks about as a stimulus-rich environment, like give them a simple drill where like the environment gives them feedback so they can feel like, oh, my elbow was out of position there. Oh, I should have kept my spine straighter. Oh, I should have like moved my feet. Like let the environment teach them rather than us having to nag the crap out of them all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-correcting exercise, that kind of thing.
Yes.
One of my favorite things is the face the wall squat. I have everybody as a good screen is to do a good face the wall squat, and it's an amazing thing because people just, it's so simple, and yet when people who haven't tried it in a while try it, it can be humbling.
Yep. Face the wall squat's a good one. Just even like a cobra stretch can be very good. Watching how someone lies down on the floor, rolls around, and then comes back up to standing.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, like, if you look at a lot of the fundamentals in martial arts, regardless of the style, those fundamental calisthenics that a lot of people look at as just, yeah, whatever, this is just a random warm-up. No. Like, if you understand that warm-up and it's crafted intelligently, it's a great movement screen.
Mm-hmm.
So it should allow the instructor a chance to see, like, who's ready for what, and then who's, like, potentially a liability.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's so much of martial arts is like that. There's so many screens, and it's all progression, and all of these concepts. I know, and that's one of the things that attracted me to FMS was it seems very much like that. Like it just jives. It's just like, it's just the same thing. It's essentially, kind of like a scientific martial art, if you want to call it that. But like, okay, so before monkey was something that I used to do, right? Monkey style. And that has tons of this groundwork and all that kind of stuff. All of that's mimicked in, like Superman, Spider-Man's, and all of that kind of thing. And it's all really fun, kind of, it's ways to get push-ups in without having to do push-ups. You know what I mean? And that's how I kind of look at that kind of thing. And there's lots of that stuff in martial arts all over the place.
Sure.
Yeah. What is there one that you think that you use, or that you think should get a little more attention, or something like that? Some exercise from a particular martial art that could benefit people in other things like that.
It's funny. That's so much about what my latest endeavor, K3, is all about.
Yeah.
So K3 combat, or K3 combat movement systems, came about as an answer to that question that you just posed. Like people around, I think 08 or somewhere around 08, were asking me a lot, because of my time with Black Belt Magazine and, my reputation in martial arts, plus, kettlebells and other stuff. They're like, so Doc, what do you do? What's your favorite workout like? What are your training methods like? And I thought about it. And then to answer the question, it was like, well, it really revolves around three things. Kettlebells being one. So that's the first K. Mm-hmm. Second thing was like implement-based martial arts from Southeast Asia, Kali or Kabikabong. Kabikabong is Thai weaponry, right. Long weapons and short weapons. And then the third K was kick punch arts, such as karate, kung fu, capoeira, whatever. So like a lot of the empty hand arts, the implement-based arts, and then strength training. And so I thought, like, wow, there we go. There's K3. So for me to be able to say, like, is there a particular exercise or a particular training method that calls me the most? It really depends on what my body's coming to the table with that day. right? Or what my exertion was like the days before, or, lack of use. Sometimes lack of use can also be a particular stressor on the body as well. So it's like, if you've been sitting at your desk hammering away at a writing project, and you haven't been able to do your normal workout and haven't been able to do as much joint mobility, that in and of itself is an industrial kind of workout, right? Like, not industrial in the sense that you're on a factory line, but industrial in the sense that you're doing work,
Right.
and it's a tax on your body. So everything that I try and do is three things, a minimum. It's some sort of rehab. Does it make my body feel better? It's some sort of conditioning. Does it help me build in like greater strength, greater endurance, something, right? And does it teach me a tactical skill? So those three things are what I look for a lot of times in how I organize my own training for that day.
Yeah. Okay, let me put it a little differently. Is there something in martial arts, obviously, with K3 being one of these things? Is there one thing that you might want to, that you point to, that we do in martial arts that could benefit other athletics, which other athletics do not yet currently really do widely?
Ooh. I can't say that. I can say that there are things in martial arts that we do that different teams may or may not do, but like sports, to be able to say like sports in general, don't do this or do this or don't, there's too much variability.
Oh, sure,
Like,
sure.
go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was, yeah, so like with me, I do like stance training and holding positions is something that I've introduced with athletes before that seems very foreign to them,
Mm-hmm.
but has a very good effect.
Right. Stance training is something like in slow-mo isometrics are probably the one thing that seem to be the most like eye-opening for a lot of the pro athletes that I've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
For them, like a lot of them are really great at going fast. So whether it's on their feet, whether it's moving their hands, regardless of what it is, their speed is superb. Their raw power is superb. But to be able to go slow and master ranges of motion, whether under just the load of their bodies or external load, like with kettlebells or what have you, right? Like that's when you start seeing some like major aha moments occur.
Yeah, yeah. All of the, yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff, because so much of that stuff, people go on in intuitiveness. Another thing that me and my brother-in-law, who's also a sports scientist here at U of M, Mark Peterson, we talk about a lot that he laments that is not used in at least collegiate athletics as much as should be, is eccentric training and deceleration and that kind of thing. That seems to be a neglected thing, because all of the topics that we've been talking about today, it's not as glamorous. It's not, it's not necessarily as fun for the athlete or what have you.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Dr. Craig Liebenson, has mentioned one time. I remember one time we were teaching a workshop, and he says the majority of times that people get hurt, athletes get hurt, it's not on takeoff, it's on landing.
Yes.
So that's a nice little soundbite for some of your listeners.
Yeah, I think statistically, what is it that the muscle is more likely to get injured in the eccentric phase anyway than it is in the concentric? Or I've read that somewhere, but
yeah, I'm not entirely familiar with the statistics, so I'll just give that one the nod.
Yeah, who knows? It seems okay. But yeah, that's one thing that I think people, of all stripes will. I mean, because we will say, I'll give lip service to say that we in martial arts do this. We don't also all in martial arts do this. There's plenty of martial arts instructors out there who don't do any of this, who just kind of show people things and do whatever exercises they do. And I've seen a couple of people. I mean, they're not necessarily good instructors, but they still exist. So
sure, variability is always very wide. I mean, like one of the things that I always have to caveat people with. It's sort of like you give a recommendation, but then you also have to say, like, people say, oh, what kind of medicine is good for this? What kind of approach is good for this? What kind of training method is good for this?
Mm-hmm.
And then, you also have to tell them, have you ever been to an Italian restaurant that you liked? And people are like, oh yeah, I've been to an Italian restaurant I like. Great. Have you ever had like Italian food you didn't like? Oh yeah, I've had that too. Okay, great. So did you condemn all Italian food after that one bad experience? No, of course not. Great. So with coaches, with instructors, with clinicians, it's kind of all the same thing, right?
Yep.
So you may have a great one, and in which case, make note of that and like make that your go-to. On the other hand, if you don't have a great experience, please understand that that could just be that, or very likely is just that individual. So keep doing your homework, keep searching.
Right. Yeah. Never stop that. And that's really, I think, one of those things, because probably the core, at least of why a lot of us get into martial arts, is that self-cultivation aspect of it, of us being able to better ourselves physically, mentally, spiritually, in whatever ways that we get out of the practice. And I think that's, for a lot of people that are not in martial arts, that's a very mystical type of motivation. But I don't, especially with current events right now, I think that's that kind of overall concern with your own well-being and stuff like that is going to become much more prominent in people's minds.
Yes. Having the ability to slow down and be with yourself is something that I think has been a great eye opener about this whole like COVID shutdown thing. So people having to be at home a little bit more, people having to face like their relationships, people having to deal with whether it's their own loneliness or their own like, the mechanics of their relationships within their family. I think these are things that we as a society needed a long time ago. And we would and will do better once we actually learn how to deal with those things in a productive and constructive way.
Yeah.
So with martial arts training, or with training in general, right, one of the things that should be one of the biggest lessons in the process is patience, right, and an appreciation of what's going on. Yet also too, that's something that instructors and coaches need to do a better job of communicating why, rather than saying you need to be more patient. Let's give people something that they're like metrics, so that they can say, look, this is what you're looking for. So we need to work on this particular exercise until you've met this metric. And then once we've met this metric, then we can do this.
Right.
So once there's a progression that's outlined and communicated clearly, and we as coaches have upped the level of our game to be able to help people understand not only the how, but also the why, then we'll have, greater follow through.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like back to the topic of rushing, one thing that as instructors and coaches, my teachers always said to me, it's like, if you rush, you may get there, before, quicker, but you've shortened your time there, because
that's beautiful.
If you take your time, you'll get there, and then you can camp out there. But like you said, if you cheat your way up there, then you kind of expend that revenue, and then poof, then you're gone.
Right.
But yeah. But anyway, like you said, I think that there are positives that can be gotten from any situation. I think for those of us who have espoused Buddhist doctrine of saying all things are temporary and all that kind of stuff, we're really being put to the test right now, because it's definitely we are definitely seeing how temporary everything is. But I do think that we're getting good things here. I thank you for coming here today. Obviously,
It's been my honor.
I've exploited the current situation in this particular case, but I'm glad I did. I know that, I definitely have been waiting to talk with you, want to work with you. At some point, I'll probably be somewhere. But anyway.
It'd be my honor.
All right. Well, thank you for dropping the knowledge on us today. Hopefully we will get to talk to you again someday. Take care, everybody, where you are, and everything like that.
Likewise, most certainly. And same to you and all your listeners. Thank you guys for joining in.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And to all everybody there, thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering.